What's up, guys? This is KP Show, and this week is Raiders week. I am joined by a Raider fan, a guy who covers the Raiders, Christopher Hansen. Chris, what's going on?
How's it going?
And Chris, for those guys who aren't familiar with you, let us know where you write or where we can find you at.
Well, you can find my work at Bleacher Report. Obviously, I cover the whole AFC West, so you can find my work, whether you're looking at the Chargers or Broncos, Chiefs, Raiders. So obviously, as these division games get going here for the Chargers, you'll be able to kind of get an idea what the opponents are doing, get an idea what I kind of think of what's going on with the Chargers, and all that stuff. So you can kind of check that out on Bleacher Report. That's kind of where you can find my stuff. I'm obviously pretty active on Twitter as well, so you can find me at Chris Hansen NFL.
Yeah, sounds good. And you cover the whole division. So as a Raider fan, do you ever find yourself, I guess, how is it covering everybody else, but you're actually rooting for the Raiders?
It's interesting. I think the longer you do it, the more it kind of changes the way that you are. There's no matter, I didn't know if it would happen, but the more you do it, the more it kind of changes the way that you cover teams. You kind of start seeing teams, whether you're a rival or the Raiders or not, as a collection of players or situations. On Sundays, during the heat of the battle, yeah, but as soon as the game's over, it's kind of like flip a switch. And then obviously, if the teams are playing each other, during the game, I have to be a little bit more look within the play a little bit more, as opposed to hanging on every edge of fandom. So it just changes the way that you kind of do things, and there's no way to really around that unless you're really covering only one team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like just the more I've been writing about the Chargers, I guess the less emotionally involved you get as the week goes on. And you can just, you look at things more objective as, the longer you cover a team. So I definitely agree with you there. So let's touch on the last week's game real quick.
Yeah.
The Jets, 31-0 was a pretty dominating performance. What did you expect before the game? Like, I guess, did the results surprise you at all?
Not really. I expected that to be a pretty good blowout performance for the Chargers, and they did that. Probably even surpassed my expectations. But when you talk about the way that they dominated, I couldn't find one positive for the Jets in the whole day, really. And looking for negatives from the Chargers was also difficult. I think Phillip had that one interception that probably would like to have back, but other than that, the whole game was really complete domination. So when you look at it that way, man, it surpassed my expectations. But I did expect them to win that game handily. The Jets they're a nightmare. They're just a disaster on offense. They can stop the run, but as we know, the Chargers up until Sunday, the running game hadn't really been a big part of what they were doing.
Yeah, that's a good thing to, I guess, kind of segue into the Chargers backfield. Obviously, Donald Brown went down with a concussion, and Brandon Oliver came in, and the way, I guess, the team's been hyping him up as, obviously they kept him over a draft pick, even if it was a 6th-round draft pick, so he must have been performing pretty well. And the fact that, I guess, he had a pretty solid preseason, and then they kept him on the roster, so he clearly has some sort of talent. And he comes in here, and he busts off a couple big gains, busts off a long run, busts off reception, and then even just some nice intermediate runs as well. Were you surprised by Brandon Oliver?
I was a little bit, just because the Jets have such a good run defense. They're pretty consistently a good run defense. They rarely give up big games like that. So I was a little surprised, especially because you're talking about a guy that he's basically the 4th-string running back. And so I was a little bit surprised to see him do that. But you also kind of have to look at, okay, how did the game progress? And you're talking about a game that was very much out of hand for the Jets. The Chargers were just running a ton, and I think the Jets have to be concerned because there was a lot of poor effort on their part defensively. And once they got down big like they did, so I don't want to discredit Oliver's performance, but there's two things you have to consider. One, the development of the game and kind of the performance of the Jets, and then also the performance of the offensive line. If you go back and look at the plays, Oliver had those big runs, even the intermediate runs. he had holes that they were they were they were just really large holes. And credit to him for hitting them and getting to the second level. But you have to give the offensive line a ton of credit, especially offensive line that was beat up for opening those holes against a good Jets defense. A defense that had been good against the run. So give the offensive line a lot of credit, and but also you have to with Oliver you have to be a little bit cautious just because. They brought in Ronnie Brown for a reason, okay, and they need somebody else back there they're gonna help them out, especially in pass pro. As a game is different, it's gonna obviously impact Oliver, but they obviously like his talent. They, as you said, probably wouldn't have kept him over Grice. Grice is a guy that I really like. So, we'll kind of see how it progresses, but obviously one game in that situation you have to be a little bit cautious on Oliver, but considering the injury issues, he's going to get a little bit of a chance here over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I don't think that they're expecting Matthews back till the Broncos game, and I don't believe that. Well, I guess it would just be wise to keep Brown out for precautionary reasons, just because. So it's definitely Oliver is going to get a shot this week for sure, and then moving forward, I guess we'll just play it by ear. They'll just play it by ear, but yeah, I think Oliver did a really good job of maximizing his carries. I think I would compare it to a boxing match, and I thought the Jets' defensive front got the best of the Chargers for sure, but whenever the Chargers did win, whenever they did win their matchups and they created those holes, Oliver really took advantage. And I think you said it well, how you just kind of have to temper your expectations. Obviously, the box score says 182 yards, wow, he really had a great day. But the way the game was progressing, the Jets were, like you said, the effort just wasn't there, and they just kind of seemed, they basically checked out by the third quarter. But still, he made the plays, he made guys miss. Even in pass protection, he looked comfortable in pass protection. He looked comfortable catching the ball. So, he definitely flashed some positives. So,
absolutely,
I wonder if they're going to slide him into that Woodhead type role, or I guess complementary type back, even when all the running backs do get healthy. So that'll be interesting to see, because he obviously put more production forth than Donald Brown has put the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because the Chargers are a team that they're not necessarily just going to ride one running back and leave him in there, almost all the time. This is a team that they brought in Donald Brown even though they had Matthews, and then they had Woodhead. And they're a team that kind of likes to segment those roles for their running backs. I know that people have been talking about him. He's kind of like Sproles in a way, or he's kind of like Tolbert in a way. But the point is, I think when they compare him, however they choose to compare him, you're talking about a guy that has a role. And Sproles is a guy that had a role, still has a role, had a role in New Orleans, has a role in Philly. These are guys that they could stay on the field if they keep producing like Oliver did. So he flashed enough potential there to steal that role, carve a role out for himself. Obviously, with Brown down now, Matthews not going to be back even when Matthews comes back. You're going to need somebody in the Woodhead role. That could have been Brown, but maybe Brown's not that guy now. So you have to kind of look. You have to kind of consider him with that talent level. What he showed and the flashes he showed, and at least give him an opportunity to kind of fill that role, because the reality is the Chargers are going to need somebody to help them out. I hesitate to say this, but Phillip Rivers, he's going to have one bad game eventually, probably, just by law of averages here. At least a game that's not up to the standards of these first 4 weeks. So. First 5 weeks. So, I think that says you're going to need somebody to kind of step up and give him some help. And that might be the running game. It might be a little bit more from Keenan Allen. He's had one big game and then kind of, hasn't been there in the other game. So you're going to need somebody to help. And Oliver's certainly a guy now going forward without Woodhead that might have to lean on a little bit.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference with Oliver and Brown, just in the obviously very, very limited sample size, was that when Brown was one-on-one, he looked like he had no clue what to do. And when Oliver was one-on-one, we saw it, like he made you miss, or he'll even kind of lower his pads and run you over. So I definitely think, if he can even he's not going to force what I think he's forced like 5 or 6 missed tackles last game. That's not going to happen. But if he can just be, kind of consistent and just make one guy miss, that'll be enough to keep him on the field. So.
Yeah, the Chargers' offense too. They're an offense that kind of relies on not necessarily the big plays that Oliver made on Sunday, but actually, hey, getting the first down, keeping the chains moving, letting Phillip Rivers have another opportunity, because the more opportunities you give Phillip Rivers, the better the offense is going to be, and the better chance you're going to have to do some damage against the opposing defense.
Yeah, and speaking of the offense as a whole, they were four. I think they scored 4 touchdowns out of 5 attempts, and usually for the last, basically since Mike McCoy's been there, that's the one area they've really struggled at. So, I mean, if they can seriously convert 2 out of 3 attempts, or somewhere in between a half and 66%, they'll be very, very good. So, I mean, 4 out of 5 was really impressive. That was one of the things that stood out to me. And I mean, we talked about Phillip Rivers. Everybody knows. Everybody's giving him his credit. He's playing out of his mind right now, and I don't know when that bad game is going to come. It seems like he's just so ahead of the game right now. He just knows what's coming. I think that play where he threw it to Oliver, where he basically not made a guy miss, but broke through a sack. And it just had the awareness to flip his head all the way across the field and dump it off to Oliver. That's basically Rivers in a nutshell this year. He's just made some really amazing plays. And, yeah, he's really masked the offensive line, who honestly he didn't perform as well as like the final score would indicate, I think.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I do think, though, sometimes we forget Rivers had stretches last year, first 4 games. Now he's done this for 5 games now, but the first 4 games, until the Raiders game, he had been as good or better statistically than this year. Now, I think on film, I think he's been better this year than he was during those 4 games last year. But part of that, too, is he's getting the ball with better opportunities to score. The defense is getting more opportunities, getting him better field position. And I think that's obviously, factoring in. But, obviously his comfort level with the offense and things is coming into play as well. But, there's no doubting Phillip Rivers. I think right now he's been the best quarterback in the league. That's obviously going to give him MVP talk, because best quarterback in the league typically is kind of where the MVP award goes to these days. And I think he can definitely keep up his level of play, but obviously it's a long season, and there's going to become a time where it maybe doesn't have quite the same level of game as he has in the past, and in the past 5 games, and that's just something you have to think about. And obviously, it might not matter if other offensive players step up. When Rivers might be struggling, the running game steps up, and you don't really necessarily have that same issue. But going back to the offensive line, as you mentioned, they didn't, when they blocked well. And the Jets' effort was inconsistent. When they blocked well, they blocked really well. The holes were really, they were big holes. But in pass pro and it's other times when the Jets were giving a better effort, they didn't quite have a very good performance against the Jets. And that's a concern. Obviously, center position's been much talked about. That's one. You also have to look at right guard and right tackle now. And that's definitely a concern. I mean, as much as the Raiders have been a bad team this year, they do have some players on the defensive front that can make you pay if you're not playing fundamentally sound. So that's going to be something to watch, kind of, maybe a little bit this week.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I do think that, if Rivers does, let's just say, air quote, come back down to earth, the way the defense has been playing, I mean, it still would be enough to win. Just if he just plays at an above average level, not a superhuman level, that would still be enough to play. I mean, obviously the Jets the Jets really didn't have a game plan. It seemed like they was just drop back and throw it deep, and that was it. The Jets were 1 for 12 on 3rd downs. That pretty much sums up the whole game as a whole. The Jets were 1 for 12. The Chargers were 12 for 18. The Jets didn't cross midfield till in the fourth quarter. That's just unheard of. And it really wasn't like a dominant individual performance by any Charger. I think they played pretty well up front, and I think the secondary, they just didn't get beat. But I mean, I don't know, they just did their jobs, and that's I guess all you can ask for. How did you feel the defense performed against the Jets?
Yeah, I think the defense performed really well. Obviously, with the big caveat that you've got the Jets offense, which is pretty horrible.
Yes.
Smith missed a Saturday meeting before the game. They don't have no wide receivers really at all. Running game, they've got a mess. It's just a mess offensively. So, with that said, I think the defense performed really well, and they have performed really well all season. I think that's one of the big reasons that the Chargers are where they're at right now. It has been the performance of the defense. You talk about the secondary last year was such a problem, and have Flowers and Verrett, two really solid players now. It just changes the whole dynamic of the secondary. Have a healthy Freeney for more than just a couple of games. That's made a huge difference, even without Melvin Ingram, which opinions vary on how much of an impact he really makes. But you talk about just that alone. Rush the passer and cover. Rush and cover is what they talk about in the NFL, and the Chargers have been able to do that so far, and I think that's really been the strength of the team. But I think even more so than the rush has been the coverage, and the coverage has really been a difference maker for the team. Weddle looks way different with having a trust in having Flowers in front of him, and you just let the whole defense is playing well. I think so. When you say, hey, was there really a dominant individual performance? No, they're just playing really well together. Everybody is feeding off of each other. And I think that's ultimately been the biggest difference in the team as a whole. I mean, Rivers is playing great, but I think he played great last year, just in a kind of a different way. The offense was a little bit different, but I think the defense is really helping him open things up a little bit, getting the team in good positions to have leads and get hold leads and those kind of things. And the NFL is funny because it really is a collection of offense, defense, special teams that all has to come together to help the team perform. And the Chargers are a team right now that you look at all the factors, look at up and down the team, they're just solid all the way around. And the defense, I think one of the things that you have to look at the defense though is how they're going to perform on the road. This is a defense that hasn't played many road games so far, and the one game, the toughest road game they played was against Arizona, and that's a game that they kind of let slip away a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how they play on the road against some of these tougher opponents, but so far you have to be impressed with what they've done.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Obviously, I think the defense has played really well so far, but I'd like to see them, like you said, on the road, and I'd like to see them do it against a competent quarterback, somebody who can actually take advantage of things. So, I mean, just moving forward as the season goes on, we'll see. I'm not doubting it, but I'm just not. I mean, I guess I'm.
You're right to feel it. I mean, the best quarterback they faced was Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson's he's really lighting it up right now as well. But you look at the other quarterbacks they faced, questionable there. So they got it as the Chargers should know. After last year, it's a long season. Things can change quickly. You could play really well, or you could play not really well for a long time. And the Chargers didn't start well last year, and they finished really strong. They started really well. Now they have to finish strong if they want to kind of keep this up. And the defense is going to be part of that. Injuries are going to be part of that, as the Chargers know on offense, but the defense has been pretty healthy for the most part. I mean, I know they lost Ingram, but they've been pretty good overall, the key players there. So can they keep it up? And I think that's really, depth, where depth comes in, where coaching comes in, is can they keep it up over the long haul against tough opponents on the road. that's really what sets good teams apart, winning on the road, winning against good teams on the road. And the Chargers haven't quite demonstrated it yet. So it'll be interesting to see once you have to go face Denver and go face even Kansas City, face those teams on the road and see how they do.
Yep, and yeah, just like you said, so the Chargers they're third in yards per drive, so on defense, which is really, really good. I mean, something that I would never imagine last year or coming into the season. I was just hoping the defense could be, league average, and they played a little bit above that, and that's really, for this team, that's really all that they need to do. So, one thing I want to touch on before we move on here to the Raiders is the play of last week was the interior line play, but I feel like he's done a pretty solid job all season. It's Sean Lissamore. During the whole draft leading up, everybody was wondering, why do you pass on Nix? Why do you pass on Nix? And we just need a guy to do their job, and that's exactly what Lissamore does. And even Ricardo Matthews, he had a really good game last week. So I want to just kind of shout out Sean Lissamore, because he doesn't make any mini sexy plays, so it seems like he's not doing anything, but he's really been solid this year.
Yeah, those 3-4 linemen don't typically get the kind of the recognition they typically deserve, because only on rare occasion is one a guy that's going to get a lot of sacks or whatever. And you're right about shouting out Lissamore, because the center of a defense, the center of a 3-4 defense is really important, being strong up the middle. And Lissamore he's just getting the job done. Maybe not dominating, maybe not flashing a lot, but just game in, game out, he's getting the job done. He's getting healthy now. I think that's helping him as well. So overall, I think that's definitely a good shout out.
Yeah, and he's a young player too. He's drafted in 2010, so it's not like he's going anywhere. So hopefully he can just keep growing. And I mean, he's not asked to do very much. He's not going to play a lot. So he's definitely an important piece to this defense. So moving on to the Raiders here, what I usually do is I like to start out with how the other team's rookies are doing. So let's get into that a little bit. Khalil Mack, number 5 overall pick, has he lived up to the hype, in your opinion?
I think he has. I think obviously if you're expecting a guy that's going to have a ton of sacks, well, it's going to be hard to do when the Raiders are playing from behind a lot. It's going to be hard to do, when he's not getting a whole lot of, other interior pressure, any other help. I mean, doing it all alone. But if you watch him on tape, he's one of the few bright spots the Raiders have, especially on defense. He's a guy that he's stopping the run. When he does have an opportunity on third and medium, third and long to rush the passer, he's getting pressure on the quarterback. So I think Mack is definitely living up to the hype. I think he's whether he can be in the conversation for Defensive Rookie of the Year on a bad team, I don't know. But he certainly, I think, it should be in the conversation, at least through the first month plus of the season here.
Yeah, I haven't watched much of the Raiders, but I did, just kind of. I watched a little bit of the Dolphins game, and I watched a little bit of the Texans game, I believe it was. So I saw Mack's athleticism on display. Obviously, I thought he was a really good player, like everybody else coming out. I wasn't sure how much of an impact he had, because there's 2 games that I just couldn't get past. It was San Diego State and Buffalo. But against Miami, his athleticism was on display. It was a run play, and it was going against Brandon Albert, who's a really, really good left tackle. And it was a run play his way, and he just kind of shook. He just kind of gave him a little move and made a tackle for loss. And it was really impressive. But he doesn't get moved. I'm actually happy that the Raiders are putting him in a position to succeed. I wasn't sure how they're going to use him. I read that in camp that at one point that they were thinking about playing him at will. Is that true?
No, he was always strong side. But what they've really transitioned to, and you'll see this on Sunday, the Raiders, when Woodley is on the field, and they don't leave him on the field all the time, but when Woodley is on the field, they'll play a 3-4, and Mack will be an outside linebacker. If they take Woodley off the field and they add, they bring in a defensive tackle, they play a 4-3 under, and then Mack is a defensive end in that alignment. And so you're going to see both probably Sunday. I don't anticipate they're going to make a whole lot of wholesale changes defensively, just because they've changed their head coach. But so that's kind of how you'll see him used. So sometimes he'll have his hand in the dirt, sometimes he'll be standing up, but basically he's doing the same kind of thing. So I think what they were talking about in camp was they would find out what he did best and then try to let him do that. And I think they found out he's a little raw in coverage, but you don't really want a guy like Mack in coverage a whole lot anyway. So I think they've been okay with letting him kind of go after the quarterback, set the edge and run game, and he's done those things well.
Yeah, I mean, him being wrong in coverage is to be expected. So you want his hand in the dirt. You want him just playing forward. As long as he's playing forward, I feel like he's going to do really well. So, I mean, that's good to hear that, in the other games that he's performing well. So, obviously, the second-round pick is probably the most important pick on the team, or the player on the team. Derek Carr, how do you feel like he's been so far?
Carr is, I think they made the right decision by starting Carr, but after a month, I can honestly say he's definitely a rookie that's struggling, and he's going through growing pains. You can see it when you watch the film, and the stats, I think, back it up pretty much too. Getting through all his reads, finding the open receiver when he's doing that, and those kind of things, just things the quarterback has to learn on the fly. Pretty much, he's struggling to do those things. He needs to get a little bit faster, get through his reads quicker. And once he does that, I think that'll free him up. But the Raiders haven't really helped him that up much because he's been throwing a ton. The running game hasn't been there for the Raiders, so that's obviously important to protect a rookie quarterback at the running game, and they haven't been able to do that. But struggling a little bit. Definitely is a guy that a good defensive game plan can take advantage of what he does or what he's been doing as a rookie. But at that said, I think up until Miami game, which was just a disaster for the whole Raiders organization, pretty much, I thought he had made subtle improvements each week as far as getting through his progressions and things like that, quicker, finding open receivers. I think he had been a little bit better each week. So if he can continue to get better, I think that's what the Raiders are ultimately hoping for, is that this is a guy that can develop into a quarterback, franchise caliber quarterback. And I think Peyton Manning said, it was valuable for him to get out there as a rookie year and go through the struggles that he did, so that way, he could learn. And I think that's what the Raiders are kind of hoping. Not that Carr will be Peyton Manning. I don't know if we'll ever see another Peyton Manning, but that he'll be able to learn from this experience. And so far, a little bit of a struggle. You're going to see that the Raiders offensively will struggle a little bit, and especially if they don't get the running game going, which I think Sperano is going to be very. That's probably going to be one of his main focuses, to get that running game on track.
I mean, I saw the Wildcat last week with McFadden against the Dolphins.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the Wildcat. Sperano, he's not afraid of unique ideas and gimmicks, if you will. I'm not afraid of those things. And the Wildcat, whether that works for the Raiders or not, I don't know. I personally would get McFadden off the field and give some of these other running backs that the Raiders have an opportunity, but that's just me.
Yeah, so from what little I could see about Derek Carr, it just seems like he doesn't have the timing down with his receivers. The one interception to ex-Chargers, Vincent Brown, so you guys probably, that sounds familiar. The interception, it looked like Brown was expecting the ball to be outside and Carr threw it inside, and that was the easy interception for the cornerback. So I just wonder how his timing is going to be. Is he expected to play this week, correct?
Yeah, it sounds like he's going to play. I mean, everything coming out of practice today, which is the most vigorous day of practice, he practiced on a limited basis, but without a brace, and he talked to the media, so sounds like to me that he's going to be a green light to go. Wide receivers you brought up an interesting point, because the wide receivers, they're certainly not helping Carr very much. You could see when you watch the games, you could see that the only wide receivers he really trusts to be where they should be are James Jones and Rod Streeter, who's now on injured reserve, designated return, but he's on injured reserve. Or James Jones and Hansen. They're the only guys he really trusts to be where they should be. And the other guys, there's been miscommunication issues and them not reading the defense. the same way as Carr, and some of that it isn't. I'm not going to say it's always the wide receiver because I'm sure some of it is Carr, and sometimes we don't know what the read was supposed to be. But the wide receivers, Raiders wide receivers aren't giving Carr any help. He doesn't have a lot of help around him, and I think that is probably the biggest thing that you look at in the Raiders. With Carr and his performance so far is he's going to have growing pains. But when you add growing pains to the lack of talent around a young quarterback, and you get a bad offense, and that's what the Raiders have. That's what they've been so far is a bad offense.
Yeah, and then just so the last rookie I want to touch on, the third-round pick, Gabe Jackson. I was actually surprised that he fell there. I thought he was the fourth best guard. I thought he would go in the second round. I actually thought he was really good. So how has he looked so far?
I really like Gabe Jackson. When you look at him on tape, and I think again, another thing, I think the whole Raiders organization had their worst game last week or 2 weeks ago in London against the Dolphins, but I think that was his worst game as well, Gabe Jackson's. But he's a guy, he's really impressive. And a matter of fact, I think the Raiders have fallen in love with him a little bit too much. And I'll say it this way: is when they're not running off left guard, they're pulling Jackson to the right and running behind him to the right. I mean, literally, you can follow Gabe Jackson and almost shut down the Raiders' run game. It's been that predictable. They need to fix that. But that said, I think they really like Gabe Jackson and what he brings to the table. When you look at the film, what he's been able to do, he's just been a guy that. I think the biggest question with him on tape when I watched him in college was, does he play physical enough? Because he realizes that he's 330 plus pounds and play physical. You say, oh, maybe he just played a little bit soft for a guy that was his size. But that hasn't been the case at all for the Raiders. He plays really physical, and I think now you're looking at him. The way he's been playing, and you look around the league, and you got Greg Robinson's not even starting, and looking at the way that Gabe Jackson's playing, and so it certainly validates your thought that he was a really good guard, and I'm surprised that he fell. I mean, the Raiders probably were lucky to have him because left guard was one of the worst positions for them last year on that offensive line, and now again, like I said, I think they've fallen in love with him a little bit too much, especially in the run game. And he's been solid in the pass game too. So, of all the rookies, you could make. I think Mack is definitely good, but I think Gabe Jackson, even above Carr, has been, as far as performance across the board, has been, better. And those three picks, I think, are what Reggie McKenzie and that group of guys, his front office, are going to point to as, hey, give us time to build this roster in Oakland. I know that they can't get around the fact that it hasn't gone according to plan and they haven't, they've made mistakes. But look at those three picks. Really, when you can get three solid picks like that out of the first 3 rounds, I think that's a pretty darn good draft.
Yeah, the picks were very un-Raider-like, as we've come to accustom. You got 3 solid starters, it seems like. So, I mean, obviously, if the Raiders can just build on that, they have other issues, no doubt, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. So, you talked about the offense struggling. What are they going to have to do to move the ball against San Diego?
Well, I think they got to get their run game going. It's hard to put a finger on, like when you watch a film, it's hard to put a finger on exactly what's going wrong with the run game, other than the running backs are just not finding the holes. They're not finding where they're. And Darren McFadden is not finding the crease. He's not patient enough, or he's not seeing it, or whatever it is. As an issue, I think those are both kind of things that I've seen, because the offensive line has been able to open up some holes, and then you also look at kind of the predictability. I mean, as I mentioned, it's just the running game has been really predictable for the Raiders as far as where they run. The kind of they use a kind of the same. They might run it out of a slightly different formation, but it's the same basic run play. Easy keys for the linebackers to kind of plug those running lanes, and I think Raiders have to break that a little bit, break their tendencies, change up their, maybe give some different running backs an opportunity. And I think if they can get the run game on track, they can keep the game close. And as we see in NFL close games, you never know kind of what's going to happen. Fumble luck, big returns. You never kind of know what's going to happen. And I think that really is the key for the Raiders, is to run the ball. And I don't know necessarily if the Chargers' run defense has totally been tested this year yet. So if the Raiders can get kind of the running game on track, I think that's an interesting game within the game kind of look at what the Raiders can do to try to keep it competitive.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I'm not really sure how much they've been. I think what I would say is consistently contested, because usually they'll build a lead, or they'll get teams in passing situations, and that's when they are able to rush, and that's when their corners make plays. So yeah, I mean, if a team is going to stick to the run, then they have a chance. It's funny that you mentioned reading keys, because that's somewhere I feel like somewhere like Donald Butler is just really, really lacking right now. He's just not playing at a high level at all. But I don't know. I'm not sure if it'll turn around or when it'll turn around, but he's been one of the most uninspiring players that I've watched so far.
Yeah. It seems like a couple of years ago it had so much potential, but it definitely has kind of fallen off a little bit. But, what I mentioned was not being tested. I mean, look at it this way: is I think they've allowed like 4.5 yards a carry. I think last year it was somewhere around there as well, like 4.5 or 4.6. But they're only allowing this year, I think, less than 100 yards per game. Now, teams that give up 4.5 yards a carry typically are going to give up more than 100 yards per game. So you're talking about a low number of attempts against them. Now, that's the nature of, they can build a lead with Phillip Rivers. I mean, they're going to be able to do that every game. But that's where I say they haven't necessarily been tested in a close contest on the road with somebody that's going to be willing to kind of stick to the run game. And I think that's an area where, the Chargers, if you're looking for one area where the Chargers, okay, where do they need to prove? Like last week, you couldn't find a negative, but if you look across the board this season, where do they need to prove? They still need to improve that run game, that run defense, just be a little bit better on a per carry basis, because eventually they're going to run into a road game where somebody's going to be willing to stick to that run and stay close and steal victory from the Chargers in those games. So that's something you have to look at. I think the Chargers, way they've been constructed now, our team though, they're not going to be out of any. They're not going to be out of any game.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't just watching the Chargers. Every game is usually always interesting. So, they know how to keep it close. It looks like their run defense is. I don't know how much into football outsiders you are, but they're 14th in DVOA, which sounds right about right, and they're 12th against the pass. So, I mean, take that for what you will.
Yeah, I think that adjusts for strength of opponent, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
So, some of you might look at some of the traditional stats are going to look better than that, because the Chargers have played some pretty bad opponents so far. So, the Jets offense, Buffalo's offense with E.J. Manuel they played, and that was pretty clear that E.J. wasn't what they needed to get going. That's about right. But as you mentioned earlier, I think that's average above average. That's a huge improvement actually for the Chargers defense, and that's really what they needed, because they had a good offense last year. In many ways, I would have said, I'd be willing to say last year was the second best offense besides the Broncos offense. Maybe not in total numbers, but in efficiency numbers, that's what I felt like they were, and I think those are more important. And so you add the elite offense like that, and now a defense that is average above average at worst. That's all you need to win a lot of games. I mean, and to be a legit contender. I know that the Broncos fans, I think, are a little bit worried now. A little bit about the Chargers and the way that the division could shake out, because as a wild card, things are a lot different. Going into the playoffs as a wild card versus number 1, number 2 seed, and so if the Broncos don't win the division, I think that's going to scare them a lot. And I think we've got a game coming up here in a few weeks with the Broncos, and I think that's probably going to be kind of a real good indicator of where these teams stack up against each other.
Oh, no doubt. And I really can't wait to. I can't wait to go Chiefs Broncos back to back. I think that'll be a really good test for the team. Obviously, much better teams than they've played so far. So if I told you before the year the Chargers would be 4-1 right now, would you be surprised at that at all?
I don't think I would be that surprised. Based on the early schedule, I mean, they've had more have 3 home games, 2 road games. I don't necessarily think I'd be that surprised about it. Before the season, if you had asked me, I was asked this question, how did I see this division shaking out? I said, who challenges the Broncos? I said it's going to be the Chargers. If it's going to be a team, it's going to be the Chargers. If the defense comes together like they expect, and it has, then that's the team that can definitely challenge. Because you got Phillip Rivers, you have a really good quarterback, and he's played great so far. And so now you have an offense that's going, you have a defense that's better. That's a team that can challenge the Broncos. I think the Chiefs have been more surprising to me what they've been able to do through this early part of the season than the Chargers have. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Now, if they end up taking the division, when it's all said and done, they end up winning the division over the Broncos, they can beat the Broncos at least one, split the games against the Broncos and win the division. Then I'd be a little bit surprised that they were able to do that, just because I think the Broncos did the same thing. They improved their defense, and their offense, I think, has more diversity in weapons that they have. But now at least I think it's a legit question to say, all right, who is the best team in the AFC West? And it's not so easy to answer, at least right now.
Yeah, they are playing at a really high level, and I know that they haven't played the strongest teams in the NFL, but at the same time, they're dominating inferior competition, and that's usually the sign of a very good team. I'm a strong believer in it's not who you play, it's how you play, and they're playing really well all across the board. So, I mean, if they can keep that up, I think the weak part is I don't think the defense played really well against Seattle, but every other game they've done pretty solid. So,
yeah,
as long as that keeps up.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, you mentioned it's how you play, and weak opponents or not. I mean, they beat Seattle. I realized it was at home. It wasn't in Seattle, but they beat Seattle. Still a tough team. Their margin of victory is a league best, 14 points per game. So the weak teams that they should be beating, they're blowing them out. And that is a sign that team is good. Like I said, the next test is to beat a tough road opponent. You're probably not going to beat them by 14, but to win the game, win a tough road game, that's going to be the next step for them. And I think, they weren't able to beat Arizona, at home, and that was I would qualify that as a tough road opponent, and kind of let that one slip. But they had every opportunity to win that game, and they were very close to doing so. Learn those lessons and go back and do it next time. I think they'll have a good shot. So, things. It's a very positive, good, reasons to feel positive in San Diego about the prospects of this team. And I think that's been accurately reflected. I think I heard that the games against Denver and New England are already sold out. And those are down the line. And if you've been, following kind of what ticket sales are like in San Diego over the past couple of years, that's not normal. And so, people are starting to believe in that, and they have good reason to.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, when you have a quarterback playing like he is, when you have a team scoring as many points as they are, and just being exciting. Like, why wouldn't fans want to go see that? So it's definitely good to see. So what do you think, getting back to this game here, the Raiders game, what do the Raiders have to do on defense? Like, what do they have to take away, do you think? Just do they have to make the offense completely one-dimensional, or how are they going to stop their Chargers offense?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not easy to stop Phillip Rivers. Obviously, if people could do it, easily, or even, good defense could do it, they would do it. And, even Seattle had struggles doing that. So I think, opponents have tried many different things. They tried to take away Keenan Allen, right? And then the Chargers go, throw to Antonio Gates. And it tried various different things to stop the Chargers' offense, and that you focus too much in one area, and that kind of gets you burned a little bit because Rivers is so good about spreading the ball to where defensive weakness is. So I think you kind of, the Raiders have sort of been known for this in the past, and I expect them to simplify a little bit the defense this week. They're gonna have to play it, they're gonna have to play it pretty straight. Try to win the one-on-one matchups, and that means, covering Keenan Allen and covering Antonio Gates, man to man. And some of those things are it's obviously a lot easier said than done. But if they can have some success doing those things, then running the game, keeping the game close, and then you get a stops on third down. The Chargers have been so good on third down. It's part of being good on first and second down too. But they've been so good on third down. You're gonna have to get some stops. You have to make some plays, and you're gonna have to. I guess it's hard because it sounds cliche. So, cover man to man to make a stop, but it really is. Sometimes it comes down to just execution. You can't play. You can't. The Raiders don't have a gimmick. They don't have a good enough team to try to. And Philip Rivers is too good of a quarterback to try to trick him. It's about rushing him, getting pressure on him. And Rivers is like any quarterback. He's not going to be quite as good against if he's pressured. Now blitz, he might be able to pick that up, but if you get natural pressure on him and you cover, you execute in coverage, you're going to be able to get some stops, and that's really what the Raiders are going to have to do. They might have a chance to get the pressure based on the kind of the struggle, the injury concerns that the Chargers have in that unit right now. Might be able to get the pressure. The question is, can they get the coverage? And I think the Raiders have struggled to do that all year this year, and really for the last several years. So I think Justin Tuck, Lamar Woodley, these veterans that the Raiders have that haven't had a great season so far, they're guys that are going to have to really kind of come out of their shell and try to get pressure on Rivers. And if they can do that, a little bit of pressure, disrupt him a little bit, maybe cover man-to-man a little bit, then, keep the game close to the running game. Then you might have a game that's a little bit more competitive. I did read something earlier. I mean, I don't know how much you buy into Vegas odds. I don't buy into, them being of any predictive quality necessarily. But, teams with 0-4 coming off a bye week, they're against the spread. They're like 22-2 or something like that, and I think the Chargers are a 7-point favorite. So you can probably expect the Raiders to be at least a competitive game. So a blowout, I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is for the Chargers to be able to blow out the Raiders in this game, as bad as the Raiders have been. The Raiders, a little bit's going to make a difference. Getting some of that offensive line healthy for the Chargers is going to make a difference. Defensively, it's just going to be about getting that pressure because they're going to have some opportunities to get some pressure against the Chargers front. Even when healthy, I think pass protection is probably where their most weakness is. So I think that's where the Raiders are going to try to get some pressure, maybe force a turnover, something like that. And turnovers were the name of the game when the Raiders beat the Chargers last year in Oakland. So I think that's what they're going to try to do. Whether they'll be able to do it or not, obviously, easier said than done.
I mean, we know that the Chargers are going to move the ball between the 20s, and what's been happening this year is when they do get down there, teams are so insistent on guarding Antonio Gates one-on-one, and I can't for the life of me understand why. Like, he continues to abuse coverage, and still, you see like a linebacker on him or a safety on him, and like they just doesn't work. So I wonder how the Raiders are going to match up with him. But I mean, if you leave him one-on-one, basically they isolate him to one side, so it's just him as a single receiver. So he literally always wins his matchup. I wonder how that's going to go. And Ladarius Green actually made a nice catch in the red zone, that touchdown that got called back. I wonder if he'll be a bigger focal point as well, with less running backs. But
yeah, it's possible. I always said that Ladarius Green's targets and opportunity had very little to do with Antonio Gates. It had more to do with the other options that the Chargers had their themselves.
Yeah. So
Comes from running back down. Yeah. I definitely agree on the new extreme being a factor. How do you cover Gates? I mean, people have been asking that for years.
exactly, and the Chargers actually really do have a lot of weapons. And I think that's another thing. Rivers doing a good job of not forcing it. Like he's not worried about getting Keenan 10 balls. He's not worried about giving Royal or Floyd, 7 balls or whatever. So, or even Gates on some. I think last week or against the Jags or whatever week it was. The last couple weeks, he only had a couple catches, so he's just spreading it out, and that makes the offense even more hard to defend. So,
Yeah, I
so
call it. Gates is funny. I'll be real quick on this, but Gates is funny because I think he has a big game. I think he had a big game last week, and then he almost becomes decoy day for Gates. People
yeah.
are so focused on stopping Gates that it's like, well, I'm not going to throw it at Gates. You're going to put 2 guys on. I'm just going to throw this guy that's wide open. And so it kind of almost goes like in spurts. Like, Gates is really good one week because defensive let off, and then the next week, they're putting too much attention on him. So we're just going to kind of use him as a decoy. They just kind of toy with the defense, and Rivers is really good about doing that.
So tell me the final score of the game this weekend.
Oh man, let's see. Uh, man, I mean, I'm gonna say, I'll say, oh, I'll say 27-21 Chargers.
Did you say
Um,
21?
I said 27-21. The Chargers winning. So 27 for the Chargers, 21 for the Raiders.
So you think
That's a 6 point. That's a 6 point win. I don't know how they'll get to that. Whether the Raiders will score late to get to that, or whether it'll be closer than we think. But I think somewhere it kind of lands in that range.
so? What different is the Raiders differently? Like how different are the Raiders going to look after their bye week on offense? Like what gives them the most points production that they've had all season, in your opinion?
Uh, that's a tough question because nothing really has. Uh, you know, I mentioned them needing to establish the running game. We haven't seen what the offense is like when they can work the rest of their offense. I honestly believe their entire offensive plan coming into the season was predicated on them having a good run game. Um, Most of their offense or their passing plays, I think, all work off the run game. And to not have a single game this year where they've been able to run the ball, I think that's really thrown them off, in all phases. So I think their best chance to have the best, points per drive or whatever, it's to establish the run. Establish run and then throw to James Jones, who's the only consistent receiver. Throw to him more, get him more opportunities because he's the only one that's really catching the ball and running the proper routes and stuff so far. You do those two things, that'll give you a shot. You mentioned something. I want to bring this up because I think it might be interesting for your listeners too. The Chargers struggles to score in the red zone. Interesting thing is the Raiders' red zone defense. They have had a ton of opponents be in their red zone, but when opponents get there, the Raiders have actually done a pretty good job of shutting opponents down, keeping them out of the red zone. So that said, I think that is another one of those kind of games within a game where you look at the kind of way the teams match up is how in the red zone do the Chargers perform against the defense that's actually in they haven't been very good overall, but one of the areas they have been good is in that red zone area. So might be see a lot of field goals from the Chargers, and I guess my score prediction maybe doesn't quite accurately reflect that. Maybe it's 26 points with 3 field goals or something like that. But somewhere like that would be, I think, where the Chargers will fall.
Yeah, and that's actually I never thought. I guess I haven't looked at how Oakland is on defense, but they're 4th in the league actually in keeping the opponents out of the end zone. They're keeping it 42%, and the Chargers are. I mean, teams aren't getting that far, but the the Chargers are actually second to last on defense. So, no, I guess the Raiders are doing a pretty good job down there. So that does have something to do, or that does impact my final score. I'm gonna say, I think it's another ugly game. I think the Chargers actually move the ball well, but they don't punch it in as much as they should. I think that they win 23-14. I think the Raiders get a late score. I do think that Carr is going to be a little flustered by some pressure. I think Legit actually gives Gabe Jackson a welcome to the NFL moment, and I think that I don't think the running game is going to be, I don't think the running game is going to be like it was last week, but I do think that the Chargers will be able to dink and dunk their way down the field like they have all season. So 23-14 is what I'm going to say.
I think that's a fair score. I think that that accurately reflects sort of where the two teams are at. I think somehow the Raiders are going to get a field goal in there, but we'll see, how that goes as a week turnovers obviously is one of the big things that can change games, and Raiders turn the ball over down in their own end or something, they won't get that field goal that they would otherwise, I think, probably be able to get.
Seabass.
Yep.
I'm a Florida State fan, so that's my boy.
The dirt is gone, by the way. The Chargers should be happy about that as well, because that's brutal to play on that infield dirt, and so that is gone. So that'll be good for everybody involved on both teams, and I think everybody can appreciate that.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Cool. Well, yeah. Hey, thanks for taking the time to do this, Chris.
No problem.
Hopefully I can get you back on in a couple weeks so we can talk some Broncos, and hopefully the Chargers still have one loss by then.
Yeah, I think that's what the Chargers are hoping for, and I think the schedule sets up for them to be that way. So it'll be very interesting once we get there.
All right. Well, hey, man, take care. I'm sure I'll talk to you before the game.
You too, Kyle. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.